And we are live. It is April 15th, 2020. It should have been tax day, but you have a 3-month reprieve. Kate is late. Boris Johnson is back in action. We don't have fun anymore, but in lieu of fun, we have Quinta Jurecic.
Hello.
Hello, Quinta Jurecic.
Hello. Thanks for having me.
It's I was going to say it's good to see you, except I see you all the time because we have our 9:30 Lawfare editorial meetings, and you are always there. So, but for all the people who have not seen you in a while, oh, and there is Kate.
I feel like I'm sprinting down the hallway, but I'm not. I've sat still, but I just finished like 3 hours of teaching. And I was like, it was like the clock was ticking and I had like 30 shiny faces in front of me. And I was like, you guys are between me and a glass of scotch. Shut up.
Dude, as Quinta will tell you, I said at 4:59, just as I was beginning, like, oh, I wonder. And then I said, oh, it's Wednesday. Kate teaches until 5. We'll just start without her and she'll be here momentarily.
Yes.
You needn't
Lo and behold.
You needn't sprint on Wednesdays. The scotch will be there when you get there.
Yeah. Quinta, it's great to see your face.
Yeah, good to see you. I mostly experience Kate now as just disembodied words coming into my email.
So let's introduce Quinta for those who don't know Quinta. Quinta is the managing editor of Lawfare. She is the only person I know who reads the newspaper and thinks about it in terms of political theory and maps it onto 3,000 years of political thought. Actually, Bill Galston does a bit of that.
Yeah, I think you're overselling me.
No, I'm really not. And she is my co-author on our weekly Atlantic column, and Kate's collaborator on the Lawfare podcast's special disinformation series, which, to the annoyance of our guest yesterday, we call Arbiters of Truth. And
I didn't want to say that. I was like, that's the name of my podcast. They were like, we really hate that term. How much do we all hate it? Can everyone drink to hating it? And we're like,
we're using it in like an ironic, knowing way.
Yeah.
But yeah, so that is my and Kate's podcast, also with Evelyn Dweck and Alina Polyakova, and we have an episode coming out tomorrow, and you should listen.
There you go. So here's my first question to Quinta. Which of our stuffed animals, puppets, or masks at the Lawfare office do you miss most when we are Lawfare in exile?
I miss the Mueller puppet. I think that we probably should have rescued him before we left, but on the other hand, he may be, enjoying his well-deserved retirement alone in the darkened office.
Yeah, because we have a lot of characters in the Lawfare office. We've got the Mueller puppet, we've got the Brookings bunny, we've got the masks, and I feel like that's one of the things that's really missing when we're sort of Lawfare in exile.
It's true. I have a stuffed Nietzsche doll somewhere, but I'm not sure where he is right now. I can bring him out.
Oh, plush Nietzsche is at home?
Do you have a paper bag, Quinta? Could you make like a stand-in Mueller, like out of a paper bag?
Just draw the face on it. I mean, my long-running joke has been that the Mueller puppet looks like Sam the Eagle.
Yes, and in fact,
so
your picture of that reminded me of a very important question, Ben, that we've never gotten to raise, but I think that Quinta is the person to answer it for us.
And what's that?
Is, if we were Waldorf and Statler, which one is which? Which of us is which?
I've never been able to tell them apart.
I honestly don't know which one is which.
The difference between the two of them, I think that they're kind of the same.
Exactly.
And yet we are
I want a mustache, so I'll go with whichever one that is.
All right. I don't know which one that is, but
Okay, I'm getting my scotch now.
All right, you go get your scotch. I'm going to clear the deck of some questions for Quinta that I know if we just open the floor, somebody's going to ask. And so let's just clear the deck of them so that when we open the floor so that Quinta can ask questions, we've already gotten rid of these. Quinta, explain your name.
It's an excellent question. So my first name is from the Latin, meaning the fifth child. I am named after my great-grandmother, who was, in fact, the fifth child.
But you are not.
I am not, correct. I am the first child, and I only have one sibling. My last name is Slovenian. It should be pronounced Jurecic. It got corrupted on the way across the Atlantic Ocean in the early 1950s. So there you have it.
And how do you pronounce it?
So I say it Jurecic, but that's basically wrong in every single way. So it should be Jurecic, which means son of George, for what that's worth. I think some people pronounce it Jurecic or Jurecic, but my branch of the family went in a different direction, and now I'm stuck with it.
On the plus side, Quinta, you could have a name that is very similar to a very uncomfortable medical procedure. So, I
always got Jurassic Park jokes when I was in elementary school.
I got witless, shitless, titless jokes. So,
Well, it's probably a good thing on that last one for you, anyways.
When you're a preteen boy, any mocking attack on your name is humiliating. And now, of course, people make jokes about witticisms, which is kind of flattering. But back then, nobody did.
The first graders weren't capable of that.
Yeah.
I want to know how many times people mispronounce the Q on your name.
Oh, all the time.
And think that you're that it's like a Hispanic Q.
Often, quite often. It makes no sense because in Spanish, so Quinta, it could be, having to do with the number 5, or the hotel chain La Quinta. Quinta means a large ranch estate, kind of. So I don't know why you would name your child that. Spanish was your first language, so
maybe
it's always a bit bewildering to
something.
me. Sure, but would you name your kid Ranch House? Probably not.
Now watch, Ranch House Anonymous is going to call in and send swastikas.
I feel their pain. Not on the swastikas.
All right. Where are we going with this?
Well, I don't know. I'm kind of just interested. We were going to have a Just Us episode because we're both having stressful, kind of very busy days. But a Just Us episode is even better if it's just us and Quinta.
Just us and one other person.
Well, mostly because the three of us have all hung out a bunch, and so that's nice. But also, I'm kind of I have a few things that I'm batting around, and your job all the time, Quinta, is to be watching the news and to read the actual newspaper as described. Although now I'm going to make you a puppet, for serious. I have a sewing machine here. Now I'm going to make
go
you
for it.
Puppet.
That sounds delightful.
Okay.
I love this idea.
Yeah, you say that now, and you're going to get some weird voodoo doll in the mail, and it's going to be very dark.
So what are you batting around? What's on your mind? And by the way, if you are not a Zoom bomber, and I think we don't have any Zoom bombers.
No, we're good today.
No Zoom bombers. So if you're not a Zoom bomber and you want to get in on the conversation, flag us in the Q&A. And there's lots of things you can ask Quinta about Carl Schmitt, and you can ask Quinta about.
Why does that guy keep coming up?
It's his time.
Yeah,
it is his time.
You can ask Quinta about why she killed Kate's great idea of calling arbiters of truth disinformation.
Oh yeah.
You can ask, it's really an ask Quinta anything kind of situation. So feel free to get in on it. Kate, go for it.
Yeah, I'm just I'm very what has been happening to me, and I'm curious if this is happening to you, but like when I walk away from my computer and I walk away from like everything for like an hour at a time or something, and I like make this decision to like take a break, not from, maybe I'll have a phone call, like a just audio call, but mostly if I like go and work outside in the yard, I don't like look at my phone for like 2 hours or something. Like on a Saturday or a Sunday when I'm not, like when I don't have to be like responding to students. And I'm finding that there's this big shift. I don't consume news in the same way anymore. I don't I hear about news. I literally like hear about news and current events by coming onto the show, and Ben tells me whether or not Boris Johnson is in the ICU.
Why
in the
is
hospital.
it a reference point for the beginning of the show now?
Yeah, I thought that was
Boris Johnson, his medical condition.
Yeah, exactly. Although now that he's better and out of the hospital, I think we're going to have a new one.
Well, it's like the Francisco Franco is still dead. Boris Johnson is still out of the hospital.
Yeah, exactly.
Anyway.
Very good.
But my point is like, I just like literally like I'm not following this stuff as much anymore. And I don't know what's happening. I was telling John, my partner, so you can see behind me, I have these nice pocket doors that I am sitting at like a kitchen table, and I have the rest of the kitchen in front of me. And like, I've sat here for 7 hours today, and he has like the wood burning stove in there and like the couches, and he's like comfortable and he works better on that type of thing anyways. But basically I open the doors at the end of the day and I say, so what happened today? What do I need to know? What is the current state of like everything? Mm-hmm. And he gives me this rundown in this very old fashioned way of like, so how was your day? What's going on? His day is like, I still don't care what he does all day, but like, I'm like, tell me what the rest of the world is doing. And he gives me this really nice rundown, or we go for a walk and he gives me a rundown. And I'm just like, are you feeling the opposite since you run on like a website all day?
Well, so how did you consume news before, I guess, right? Like, what's the comparison?
I mean, I guess like before, I feel like every spare moment I was on my phone, and like I would have the exception was that when I had in-person meetings or like teaching, I would not be on my computer or phone, but otherwise I was just like I had seemed to have an endless capacity for screen time. Mm-hmm. I guess is really what I'm getting at. Meaning that like, I was happy to just scroll through. If like I wasn't getting notifications on Twitter or new email, I'd just scroll through Twitter and look at what the news was. I'd go to the NewYorkTimes.com. And one, I don't have like the tolerance for more screen time right now to go look at this stuff or to read something. But two, it's depressing. But three, I don't have time because it's like, it feels non-urgent. Like there are fires I have to put out, which are like, my students are like going to the hospital, and like, I'm having to turn in my final exam so that people know what, all of these types of things that are like have to happen right now. I'm just kind of curious, like what your day-to-day has been like, and like what other people's, like what's happening out there.
I mean, I pretty relentlessly consumed news before as a requirement for the job, honestly, because it is a benefit to be able to say, Trump just did this, the DC Circuit just did that, right? And be able to, post a court opinion really quickly or respond rapidly to whatever it seems like the new development is going to be. I do think that Lawfare's role is a little less front and center right now than perhaps it was during the Mueller investigation and impeachment, and Ben can jump in here and correct me if he disagrees. But I mean, I think we do have a valuable role to play. Like I'm really proud of the stuff we've been putting out about quarantine authority, public health authorities, all that good stuff. We've had a really great run of commentary about the testing and tracking app suggestions for contact tracing, whether that's feasible, whether it's legal under the Fourth Amendment, that kind of thing. And I'm really proud of that. But it's less it strikes me that it's less of a situation where, you know, such and such thing happens and we feel like there is a rush of people demanding to know, you know, like, what is Team Lawfare's take on X, right?
Yeah,
which is as it should be, because people should be asking, you know, what is the public health expert's take on this? What is the epidemiologist's take on this? And so with all that as background, I feel it less urgently, the sort of need as part of my job to stay glued to the news, but just as a person living in the world, I am still consuming it pretty unrelentingly, honestly. I mean, my phone still sends me alerts about how much screen time I've used per day.
Ben's been talking about these.
Which is right, exactly, which is really the sort of self-flagellation that I like to end my day with. But
you have not been watching in lieu of fun.
Yeah,
Quinta,
that's actually not what we're saying.
Or you would have seen my rants about this.
Okay.
But I think that all kinds of things that, like, screen time warnings were designed to protect us from, like, you know, not socializing enough, not all of these things now, in order to do, we have to use screen time. And so it's actually, the meaning of it as a metric has changed completely. And like right now, this is my social hour for the day. You know, I'm spending time with people. We're engaging socially. This is all the things that Apple is warning us, you know, you're not doing enough of when you use screen time. And, you know, and you have to use screen time to do it. And so, like, I think it's actually, like, they're going to have to change what the metric of evil is now, because screen time is measuring all the good stuff too.
That's totally true. I mean, and most of my screen time is honestly Twitter, which I think is as it has ever been. And it's definitely true that the sort of social aspect of Twitter, I do think, is important now, right? Like, I can get a window that Twitter was how I had a sense of how bad things were in Wuhan very early on. And it is incredible that you can, you know, I'm sounding very Pollyannish here, but it is genuinely incredible that you can basically find people who are in Wuhan or people who know people who are in Wuhan.
I don't think that's Pollyannish. I think that is like, I mean, I think it's amazing. John and I were the same way. That's how we were, like, more him than me. Sorry, but go ahead.
No, I mean, I think we're making the same point, right? It's all, I mean, Ben, I'm maybe reiterating stuff that you've already said, but you know, this goes back to a point that I think Kate made on Disinfocast episode, that we're sort of at an anti-techlash, right? That it's the backlash to the techlash, where there's sort of a moment of understanding how incredible our ability to connect is, right? That we can do this right now. At the same time, it is also true that I've been staring at Twitter all day, and with apologies to Ben, have absolutely been less effective than I would have been had I been forced to shut up the news all day.
You're fired, Quinta.
Well, I haven't gotten my stimulus check yet, so if you could just wait for another couple weeks.
Yes, your job security is.
I'm trying to figure out how to get my stimulus check from 500 miles away from New York City.
Well, you know, it'll have Donald Trump's name printed on it. But when Quinta...
Oh, that's something that someone could tell me. I was listening to NPR today because I went out to the mailbox which requires a car where I am. But what is that thing about? I heard that on NPR. They're like, that's the first time the Treasury has ever issued a check with Donald Trump's name on it. What was the
he wants to have his name on it.
That's it?
And he can't actually have his name on it in the place where you would normally have a check signed, because that's not how it works. So they're putting his name in the memo section of the check. That's what I got.
Oh my God. See, this is
as it should be.
News.
Right. Here, so this is we have a question here. Let's see if it is a civilized question.
Yes, it is.
All right, let's rapture this person in.
Yes, I have feelings about this question because I do have certain.
Ted Gilchrist, the floor is yours.
Hi there, Ben. By the way, I coined the term rapture. I don't know if you know that from the
You are the coiner of that term.
Yeah.
Yes.
But anyway,
You actually left in the comments that it was your aspiration someday to be
yeah.
raptured in. And I made a note of that and stole it and represented it as my own.
Well, this is
and so good on you for calling me on it.
No, that's not what I called it. I would not be so trivial as to have that be what I want to talk about. Can you hear me okay, by the way? Yeah. So I'm just curious because I know you're all extremely smart people, and so I'm curious. Like for me, it's a compulsion. Like basically, there's two fronts of research that I'm really interested in. One is the whole question of opening up the economy and how that's all going to go down, and the other one is things like how they're going to discover a cure for the vaccine. So I compulsively seek out news about that, and I'm just curious if any of you do that also, or what.
So to the first question about opening the economy, this is exactly how my thought process went. Okay, this is like, what is the best way to learn about how we're going to possibly open the economy? I can try to talk to economists. No one knows what's going on. We can try to talk to government. No one knows what's going on. We can try. Okay, the only way to look at this is to maybe go back to maybe look at Wuhan and maybe look at places where they are finally opening the economies again, and to look at this by example. But then I remember that basically all of the opening of the economy might be completely changed if the virus simply goes dormant in the way that viruses do. That we don't know, why the flu virus is seasonal, all of these types of things, which brings me to your other question, but one second. But basically, there is a limit. That is usually the point at which I'm limited in how much time and energy I'm willing to spend on figuring out the answer to a question that is relatively unknowable, and the whole game of the question could basically ultimately change if this virus alters in some appreciable way.
Quinta,
I will leave it at that.
What are the stories that you're actively following that, not merely out of professional obligation, but that you're particularly interested in right now?
It's a good question. I have been really interested in this question of sort of why the virus hasn't hit harder in certain areas, right? So right now, Southeast Asia, it really there doesn't seem to be very many cases there. And you could absolutely say, well, but they're not testing or something like that. But on the other hand, even if you don't test, people will die. And there doesn't seem to be much of that either. The same is true, is my impression.
Reporting the deaths, isn't that the big thing?
Well, right. So with giant caveats about how we have limited amount of data on basically everything, right? This is true in Southeast Asia, and it's also true in, I think, across most of Africa, kind of in Latin America, although Ecuador has been hit really, really hard. And so I've been super interested in discussion around why that might be. And the answer honestly seems to be nobody knows, but it's an interesting question. The other thing I've been interested in is this issue of what percent of people who have been infected, and apologies to any epidemiologists listening if I'm using the wrong terminology here, I'm very much a layperson, are asymptomatic. Because that is obviously a huge issue in terms of both knowing how to counter the virus and knowing how fatal the disease is if it's contracted. And there also seems to just be a huge amount of variability in terms of estimates on that, right? That, a third, a fourth, 75%, whatever, I've seen a lot of numbers being thrown around. And so those are the things that I've really been focused on, just they've grabbed my attention for whatever reason. That said, I think one of the interesting things about, I referred to myself the other day on Twitter as a professional opinion haver, which I think is more or less accurate. I, as a matter of professional opinion having pride, try to keep my opinion having to issues on which I actually know something. And I do think it is important, right, like to not, there are a lot of people who go out there and basically say, you know, I know calculus, like, let me figure out for you how quickly we can reopen the economy, that kind of thing. And so I'm very conscious of my own limitations here, right? And so these are things that I've been following. I haven't talked much about them publicly because I don't know what the answers are. I don't know what speculation even is responsible or irresponsible. So it's a strange sort of enabled by social media, but not particularly contributing to it, right? Where I just kind of quietly stalk these stories and don't, you know, retweet or post about it.
Well, so Quinta, you know calculus. When can we open up the economy?
Well, Ben, the area under the curve.
I feel like I was, okay, so I'm a dork, but I was like pretty into virology before all of this. And so this is like only deepened it. But what Quinta said, what you said about the asymptomatic but carrying, and like the carrying people that can pass it along, and whether or not you can self-immunize, and like if it's more like chicken pox in self-immunization, or it's more like kind of.
I will say I had shingles just a couple months ago. So I can answer any questions about, you know, chicken pox.
Yeah, you know everything. Tell us everything. What about the virus?
Exactly.
Virus? Do you know that shingles, it's really fascinating. Do you know that like smallpox, well, of course you do because you had it, but like it like exists in like in the lumbar areas of your spine and affects like the neural things, which is why it like presents in stripes.
Yep.
Yeah. Not loved that, but I always found that to be a fascinating manifestation, like of like.
Spoken like someone who's never had shingles.
Sorry.
It was fine.
All right. Anonymous attendee.
It's better than coronavirus.
Definitely.
Anonymous attendee, who I assume is a different anonymous attendee than Swat.
Than the one who accused you of being fat and bald.
Yeah, exactly. Says, can you please explain to an underinformed person like me why the Justice Department is under the executive rather than, say, the judiciary? I think it's a problem. Quinta, why is the Justice Department not part of the judiciary?
I mean, there are a lot of different ways to answer that question. I think the historical answer is because Congress set it up under the executive branch, right? And the executive obviously constitutionally has the power to execute the laws, which involves, I'm sorry, you're getting some very nice window shade pattern here right now on me.
It kind of like
this is me being raptured
across the stripes though.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, very nice. And that involves identifying instances of law breaking and prosecuting them. So it's within the executive's constitutional remit. Ben, is that how I do?
Pretty well. I mean, look, the executive branch does the activity of the government, and the court's job is to adjudicate things. And prosecuting is not a judicial function, it's an executive function. And similarly, you know, a large percentage of the executive branch is not the prosecutive functions, but the investigative functions, particularly the Bureau of Prisons, right, is a substantial component of the executive of the Justice Department. And so these are agencies that do things, you know, that, and they need to be, you know, the judiciary, you know, sits there and people bring cases and they decide cases. So these are very much executive functions, and they are therefore part of the executive branch.
Pardon the interruption. I was getting rid of my second set of stripes.
No, I'm a little, what is the problem that they think exists with the DOJ being in the executive branch?
Well, I think the implication of the question is that the president gets to appoint Bill Barr, and Bill Barr gets to kind of be Bill Barr, you know, and whereas
but the entire idea of the DOJ is that represent, like, to a certain, like, that it represents the executive branch.
Exactly.
Right.
To like that it is the law firm of the executive branch.
Exactly.
Right.
It's actually very hard to imagine how it could be part of the judiciary, because even if imagine you know, for somehow put it in the judiciary, then it would bring cases in front of the judiciary, which is kind of itself, right? And when the federal government indicts Kate Klonick, it's United States Justice Department,
which will surely happen someday.
Yes, exactly.
It almost happened when I was 20 years old.
What did you do?
Oh, Ben. I was actually 19. And I hope that the statute of limitations on this is expired.
Well, it would have to be quite a crime given that you're 34 or 35, according to your Twitter feed.
I'm 35. When I was in college, I arrived home one day to my dorm room, my freshman year in college, and I tried to check my email, and my internet had been shut off. And I said, hey, I called up IT at my university and I said, hello, why is my internet shut off? They said, we received an internet desist letter from the RAA, and basically that you're in violation of federal copyright law because you have been downloading songs from Napster. Actually, to be fair, at the time it wasn't Napster. The IT guy was wrong. I was like over Napster. I was on to Kazaa and LimeWire at that point.
Oh my!
I was making this stupid mistake of seeding and not just leeching, and so I
let that be a lesson to you.
Lessons. Don't share, Kate. Stop sharing. Less sharing. And so, I didn't almost get arrested, but this was like the closest I came. When I did my FBI background check for both of my federal clerkships for the top secret clearance, I was like, this one time I violated federal copyright law. I was kind of like Chunk in like the Goonies when he's like crying. I don't know if anyone remembers.
Well, you'll be devastated to know, Kate, that yesterday you violated federal copyright law.
I know.
by playing Parton's 9 to 5 on In Lieu of Fun. YouTube showed up in your dorm room and removed it. And so I had to edit out. And we're not going to be able to do the song of the day anymore because YouTube is on to our illegal copyright infringement scheme.
It's okay.
So, no more song of the day for you. Tony Cava, question. The floor is yours.
Hey, you guys are a bunch of criminals. I wanted to ask about masks because I know Quinta, if I can be so informal, has been tweeting about that. And I guess my question is, first we were told not to wear them. Now we're being told to wear them. And there's been a lot of discussion, at least on my next door neighbor or whatever they call that, about giving away your N95 masks. And as someone in construction, I have a few N95s laying around. So my question is one of the reasons why you would need a mask is if you're caring for a loved one at home. Either they would wear a mask or you would wear a mask, or both of you would. And I would assume a homemade cloth mask really wouldn't cut it if you actually definitely had COVID and were very infectious. So I'm just wondering where we stand on that. It seems to me that if you did have some N95s, you should be holding on to at least a few of them in case you have to care for someone.
Where are you on the mask controversy, Quinta?
I mean, again, so with the caveat that I am not an expert, I am a layperson, it does strike me as a pretty astonishing failure of public health messaging, right? insofar as people were told, I mean, the Surgeon General posted a kind of jokey tweet about like, stop buying masks, people. And then, you know, a month later, the government comes out and says, actually, please have masks. The Washington Post had a story today about staffers in the White House who were trying to get masks for themselves while the government was busy saying, actually, you don't need a mask if you're not a healthcare worker. The whole thing is just a total catastrophe in that sense. So I don't, first off, I think I don't blame anyone for being confused. It's incredibly confusing, and even I don't understand what we should be doing, and I've been trying to track it really carefully. I will say I personally accidentally came into possession of an N95. A friend lent me a emergency bag, you know, with like rations and all that kind of thing, which she thought had just a cloth mask in it, but it turned out it was an N95. I spent a while trying to figure out what to do with it, because if you for people who do want to donate them, there's a website that's called Get Us PPE or something like that, that you can donate, but a lot of places will not take open containers, and I just had the one. I ended up donating it through something called Mask Match, where you can basically just put in your information and, sorry?
The internet is such an amazing place.
Yeah, it was actually, it was great. I mean, I don't have total confirmation that, you know, it got exactly what they said it would get, but I have good reason to believe it did. And basically they'll just match, you put in, you know, I have one N95, and someone on the other end will say, I need one N95 and I'm willing to accept one that was in an open container. And they say like, great, you know, and so I mailed it to Tennessee, I think. So that was my personal calculation. I will say I made that calculation knowing that I was not presently sick. I had a friend staying with me, but she wasn't sick either. I'm not a healthcare worker, and I am otherwise healthy. So I sort of assessed that, given how I understood my own risk, that it made more sense for me to send it to someone else who would need it more. That was my calculation. I think my sense is that it does, to some extent, because the public health messaging has been so spotty, that people are making these decisions for themselves. And I don't know if there's anything wrong with that. So I don't know. I mean, this is so unsatisfactory, but I think the only thing that we can really do is find the best information we can, make these sort of hard decisions for ourselves. And obviously, if you have more than you need, absolutely donate them. And there are lots of ways to do that. And if you have an N95 and you think you would actually be okay with a surgical mask or a cloth mask, consider donating the N95 for someone who really needs that and can't settle for anything less. And the other thing is that I felt like after I donated my N95 mask, I would go out wearing cloth mask and I would see people in N95s and sort of feel angry, like, you know, you're schmucks, you have these masks and you're not donating them. But the thing is, like, I don't know what those people's situation is, right? Like, for all I know, they're immunocompromised and they need to go out and get groceries, right? Or something like that. And I don't think we can know what everyone's situation is. And there's a tension, certainly, in sort of, we all are trying to give as much as we can. But then I think the best way to do that is to do that without being angry at people who seem to be giving less, but whose situations we don't know. That's a very long and winding answer.
Yeah, I mean, I do think, though, when you see somebody outside wearing an N95 mask and no gloves, you have to, you do get to ask at that point whether the mask is a vanity statement of some kind. You know, an N95 mask in the construction industry is one thing, where, you know, it's basically functioning as a particulate protector for your lungs. But when you're talking about viral protection, your hands are in the long term almost as important as your mouth, because you know, despite the guidance, you do touch your face. What's on your hands gets in your face. And so, when you look at people who are geared up in a hospital, they've got a gown, they've got they've got gloves, and they've scrubbed down, and they are wearing an N95 mask, right? But if you're just wearing an N95 mask walking around outside, I mean, it's going to do you something until some particles land on your hands. And then, and so I guess my question is, when you see people wearing N95 masks and nothing else, I do think it is probably not totally unreasonable to be a little bit irritated with them.
Although at the same time, I looked into whether I should get gloves, right? Or whether gloves were available, that I wouldn't be taking them from healthcare workers. And there's guidance that actually, like, you don't need gloves if you're going outside. And it's actually more effective if you're just going to the grocery store to just like be really rigorous about washing your hands. So I guess part of my point is just that there's so much conflicting information. Everybody's trying to figure out what the right thing to do is. Most people are being altruistic. Some people are being schmucks. And I think part of what I'm trying to do personally is sort of be, honest and not Pollyanna-ish about what I see around me, but also not be instantly bitter about how everyone else isn't handling this as well as I am.
Yeah, I don't, schmucks is harsh. I think the term I would use is just not calculating risk rationally. And I think we are programmed as a species not to calculate risk rationally. And this is a situation in which it is actually better for your health. You, not you, Quinta, but you, one. It's better for one's health, and it is better for the aggregate public health, for other people's health, if everybody exercises a little bit of discipline in assessing risk accurately. And I don't think it is too much to expect, but I don't think it's too much to expect that people try.
The thing that I do wanted to say really quickly, and then we'll go to Big Blue Blogger's question, which is just basically
it's all just an excuse to say Big Blue Blogger, which is really fun to say.
But okay, so there's two different levels of shaming that I'm hearing here. Like, and I'm not hearing like shaming from you, Quinta, but I'm hearing you contemplating it. And I think that that's an interesting part of it. But the shaming is two things. One, that people are selfishly hoarding goods that other people need. And then that people are having absolutely no care in the world about the need for goods, or like the fact that they should be protecting themselves, and by not protecting themselves, they're putting others at risk. And that those are two really interesting kind of problems that are like kind of at opposites in terms of how they're answered economically, with like the market and what the goods are. But that I think that like we can basically, with the former, the idea that we have these people that are, as you said, like kind of like, you don't know the person's immunocompromised position that they're deciding to have an N95 mask and they're not a hospital worker. I think that I think that we should give those people like the benefit of the doubt. Mm-hmm. I don't know what's happening in your community right now, but in my community, my local tiny market, like in this tiny beach town, has been having curbside delivery and doing all this stuff, but has had the store open. And they wrote like a desperate plea today of like people to stop coming into the store that don't have masks. And like the main people that aren't adhering to any of the mask policies are like the locals who do construction year round here and do all this stuff and think that this is like not a real thing, or think that this is not actually something that's happening. Not the people who have come here from necessarily, maybe at first it was, but not from Boston and New York. And so I'm kind of like, it's actually like really strange. I feel like an interloper in a community. And if I see some guy in like Carhartts and work boots and not wearing a mask and not wearing gloves, getting coffee at the market, it feels really bad to basically shame him. Like, cause I'm like this like fly-by-nighter. I don't live in his community and I've come here to be safe. And like, I'm kind of interloping. So I feel actually this really conflicted feeling. I just kind of wanted to put that out there that like,
yeah,
when it's super Clear.
That leads. Big Blue Blogger has vanished in a puff of smoke. But
Like
this,
the genie in
uh,
Aladdin. Sorry.
but this leads seamlessly to Jen's question.
Hello?
Are you there?
Yeah. Oh, hi. Yeah, I'm here. Can you hear me?
Indeed.
Okay. Yeah. I was just wondering, is anybody there having issues with social distancing when they're trying to work out outdoors? Hang on a second. I had to stop the Roomba. Anyway.
I wish I bugged out with my Roomba. I miss it so much.
Oh, I love my Roomba, but sometimes he's dumb and he doesn't know when to go back to his little stand. But anyway, we used to go out on our trails that are like right across the street from our house, and now we basically can't do that anymore because everybody's decided that they're now all of a sudden a jogger, and the place it's packed, and they're walking 2 and 3 abreast. So the trails themselves are they're barely 6 feet in diameter. And so we were having to like walk in the mud and stuff to get around people. And I was wearing a mask and they would just walk by me and smile. And I'm just like, dude, I'm wearing a mask. And why are you walking 2 by 2? Like, can't you do single file? I mean, I just wonder, is anybody else having the same problem?
Quinta, you have actually been.
I've complained about this.
You have complained about exactly this subject.
Yeah, no, it's definitely been a problem. I will say the majority of people where I am in my corner of Washington, D.C., I feel like have been heeding health advisories. Like there was one day when nobody was wearing a mask and then the CDC said, actually wear a mask. And the next day I went out and vast majority of people were wearing masks. So credit to that. But yeah, no, it's definitely a problem. I personally have been trying to map routes that don't take me by narrow paths, that take me in, wider areas or quiet streets and places where people really aren't, which means giving up some of my favorite walking routes, but I think it's worth it. It's sort of a frustrating compromise, but I don't know what else there is to do.
Big Blue Blogger has rematerialized. Big Blue, the floor is yours.
I am so sorry, Ben. First of all, I really want to say I enjoyed your article with Quinta in the Atlantic. Great piece. I wanted to follow up on that since you're right about Trump being kind of a lazy authoritarian, just for the benefit of those who haven't seen the piece. What do you think that implies for life after Trump? Can we just let him drift off into his little solipsistic reality TV universe, or do we have to turn the law loose on him in New York and elsewhere?
What a great question. Quinta, why don't you give your thoughts on that, and then to the extent they don't dovetail perfectly with mine, I will supplement them with my own.
Sure. I mean, look, I think the question of any potential prosecution is a really hard one for reasons of statutes of limitations, not to mention questions of whether evidence is there, and then the sort of normative difficulties of what happens when you have one president prosecute his predecessor, even although we would hope that this prosecution would be taken as much as possible without any political involvement. So I'm going to kind of table that because I think it's a discrete and really tough question. I do think that the suggestion that Trump, the New York Times reported this morning, I think, that Trump had apparently proposed doing like a White House call-in radio show, which I guess is his equivalent of a fireside chat about the coronavirus, but then had self-vetoed it because he didn't want to compete with Rush Limbaugh. I think there has been reporting about how what he really wanted to do when he thought he lost the election in 2016 was create Trump TV. So I would imagine that whatever he does at the other end of this is going to involve, some kind of platform, presumably radio or television, or God forbid podcast, where he can just talk at people and kind of, as you say, create the world that he wants to live in. In a way, I've wondered whether he would kind of be happier if he lost in 2020 and then could sort of say, basically have his television network, have his, time on the air and sort of be free to come up with a Dolchstoss myth about how he was wronged and this was stolen from him. And then he gets to do what he really likes to do, which is complain, and doesn't have to do any of what he doesn't like to do, which is govern. So if he is out of office, that is my most likely scenario for him. Ben, what do you think?
So I agree with Quinta that the question exists on two levels. So the first is, should it be an expectation that when a president leaves office, having committed crimes, that we aggressively prosecute those crimes? And I have always thought that the way the Ford administration handled this was elegant and kind of beautiful, which is that the prosecutors took the position, absolutely, we should prosecute the former president. And the president did not interfere with the Watergate Special Prosecution Force. He did not tell them not to do it. He simply exercised his own prerogatives preemptively to pardon Nixon, and he did it without consultation with the Justice Department, so as not to corrupt the Justice Department or influence the Justice Department. He simply did it. And he did it, of course, very publicly and in a fashion that he then took political responsibility for, which probably cost him the election. He went up to Congress to testify about it. And I always thought this was, the right posture. And I would have very limited reservations about a similar thing with Donald Trump, except for one thing, and it's a big thing, which is that, Richard Nixon was a deeply corrupt and malevolent figure, but he was content to recede to quiet private life. And he was content to sit on the beach in California, and then eventually to move to New York and kind of write books and be a sort of elder statesman, and actually, weirdly, to be a kind of constructive player in advising subsequent presidents, including presidents of the opposite party. He had a quite close relationship with Bill Clinton. And
you're a narcissist. I mean, that's actually I don't want to I don't want to cut you off, but I think that's a beautiful way of putting it. But I've never heard that before. But yes, it really there's a narcissism that didn't exist in his failure.
Exactly, and he was.
He was a more complicated person.
Well, he was among other things smarter and more self-aware, and he understood that he was in disgrace, and so he spent the rest of his life making actually interesting contributions on substantive matters, and B, trying to diminish the disgrace, which people will argue about whether he did successfully or not. But I do think that's an easier situation to say, as Barack Obama said in a different context, let's look forward, not backward, than somebody who is actively engaged in a disruptive fashion in the public discussion, and who is completely unapologetic. And Nixon was modestly apologetic. He acknowledged that he had erred, although he did not acknowledge the scope of the fact or scope of his criminality. And so I do think the posture that Trump takes is going to make it radically difficult to simply forgive him or turn away from him. And the other thing is, I agree with Quinta, he's likely to be a significant media presence. And I also would not, if he loses re-election, I would not put it past him to run again for years.
Oh, 100%.
And so you're talking about somebody who is potentially not simply a past figure in these debates, and somebody whose conduct is not simply in the rearview mirror and kind of like a roadkill that, you know, you have to decide how much time you want to clean up, but somebody who's, you know, you're also speeding toward in some sense. And so I think that makes...
I mean, you've written this in your book, Ben. I don't think it's something that we've seen in the presidency, let alone government, really, in the US, like, at least not in modern history.
Well, there's nothing like it. I mean, so there is one president in history, not Jackson. Grover Cleveland was elected, defeated, and then reelected to a second non.
Oh, I don't mean that.
Term.
I mean buried in the Princeton Cemetery.
Oh yeah. I'm going to say something really quickly. Genevieve, I see you in the participants list. If you would like to ask a question, we'd love to have you on the show. Genevieve is one of my 1L property students who discovered the show. I do not publicize this show to my students because it is undermines my power. It's like as a professor. I think a little bit.
You know, Genevieve, your professor yesterday on this show illegally seized the intellectual property of a law-abiding citizen.
I love Dolly Parton.
And
how could you do it?
And hoarded it for herself, and faced punishment at the hands of the powers that be. Yeah, sure.
True story.
Hey.
I own 35 Dolly Parton albums. All of them, and this is like a great moment of like the end of ownership, which we should have Jason Schwartz on, by the way, and to talk about kind of the end of ownership and his work. But and his wife is Kate Crawford, the very famous kind of AI and discrimination in algorithmic bias scholar. But I was living in upstate New York, clerking for a Second Circuit judge, and there was not much to do. So every day on my way home from work, I stopped by the Goodwill, and I would just kind of like peruse what new stuff had been dropped off. And so one day somebody dropped off 55 Dolly Parton records.
Wow.
And they were $1 each in vinyl. And I had a record player.
Wow.
All 55 of those Dolly Parton records.
Wait, but you said you only own 35. So what happened to the other 20?
Well, I sold the other ones because it turns out to be duplicates. For more that paid for all of the $1 purchases that I bought. But yes.
So Genevieve says, I don't have a question today, but I am really enjoying the conversation. And also, if you're going to break the law, what better reason than Dolly?
Well said. It's a really good way to wrap up our conversation.
That is a really good note on which to wrap up. Thank you, Quinta Jurecic, for coming on the show. And we're not going to have a song of the day today, unless it's like, you know, because you have to go.
Happy birthday.
You have to go back to Gregorian chant before the stuff isn't copyrighted.
Everything has to be in public domain.
Yeah. Well, including the performance. I mean,
exactly.
There's no, but here's what I don't understand. You were playing a YouTube video.
I know.
If it's a problem, why do they let the YouTube videos stay up there?
I literally just brought it up in my internet law class that I was doing before we got here. It's like, it's because they have automated technology that catches these things and just garbage. So there's like some type of licensing agreement they got with that YouTube video. And then like, that's something that it flagged for something else.
Well, we're going to have to talk about this on a future show. Tomorrow, we don't know who we're having tomorrow, except that it is the day that we're going to hear Maggie Feldman Pilch sing, and we're going to edit her letter with her to the New York Times.
Oh yeah. Is that happening live? Yeah.
No, that's happening tomorrow. So I don't know. That won't be fun because, you know, we're not allowed to have fun anymore. But in lieu of fun, we are going to have a good time with Maggie. And
I would say we have a good time here. We have a good time.
I tweet with I hang out with Maggie all the time. When people get together, we work out together and we like have brunch and shit. And we tweet at each other all the time. We share opera. I've never actually heard her sing. So it's going to be a big day for me. It's going to be, there's going to be editing. We're going to have a screen share. We're going to go over, we're going to do a live edit, and we're going to hear Maggie sing. So you won't want to miss it. That'll be 5 o'clock tomorrow. And remember, if you can't have fun, in lieu of fun, you can still hang out with us.
It's so true. Quinta, thank you for coming